for joining us on day 2 of the 12 Days of Turner. Father called me Sheri and my mother called me Sheri. So I kind of grew up not knowing which name was, which pronunciation was the one to go with. But actually I must have made a choice because most people call me Sheri. Well, I stumbled upon Juneteenth when I lived in Los Angeles. I remember my husband and I were just kind of taking a walk and ended up in this park. And they were celebrating, like I said, June what? You know? And as I kind of learned about it, I realized that a lot of the history that, Juneteenth was concerned with was my local history here in, Tidewater, Hampton Roads. And so it was like, when I came back to the area to live, trying to figure out what I was going to do in terms of work, it was, just kind of backed into it that I started writing plays that were based in our local history. And those plays dealt with this difficult history, but the plays seemed to somehow be able to help people have conversations about it. And I realized that that was important in terms of healing from the wounds of slavery, that we had to be able to talk about it so that we could get beyond the anger and the pain and the hurt and, get into some healing about that. And so it's kind of evolved as a way of being able to, work, be able to work at my craft of being a playwright, as well as, wanting to unpack this history in a way that was helpful. The reason that Juneteenth exists is because in 1865, at the end of the Civil War, federal troops fanned out across the country spreading the word that slavery was over. And wherever they got to, there would be a celebration. Victory Day, Liberation Day, Emancipation Day, you get the gist here. And many of those locations, they would continue to have annual celebrations on the date that they got the news. They got to Galveston, Texas on June 19th. And because of the date on the calendar, it became known as Juneteenth, their celebration. And, from that point forward, Juneteenth started to take over in terms of, how people celebrated the end of slavery. And now there are Juneteenth celebrations in all 50 states and the territories, and even overseas. It's been done a lot here locally. It's called Abolitionist Museum. And in that play, we have 8 historical figures: Abe Lincoln, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, John Brown, Nat Turner, Frederick Douglass, David Walker. Is that 7? Is that 8? I always forget one of them. But they are wax figures in a museum. Oh, Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Abolitionists agitate intensified hostility between the North and the South.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Walker, and in 1829, about 2 years before Mr. Turner's insurrection, I wrote a 76-page pamphlet, generally referred to as David Walker's Appeal.
Only 13. Harry ignored the order and went to the aid of black man. The man dashed through the door. Harry stepped between him and the overseer and raised the overseer, picked up a rock and flung it at the escaping man.
Into nature.
How come you're the only one with the right to fight?
Mr. Lincoln, one of the reasons I believe God entrusted to me the task of sharing Uncle Tom's story was to force white people to look at good, kind...
They are wax figures in a museum, and the museum curator brings in a Confederate flag, and they debate whether or not to burn the flag. So, at the end of the show, we asked the audience, if you were a resident in this wax museum, what would your vote be, to burn or not to burn? And we've taken that play into schools and to churches and other faith institutions, and recreation centers and outside, in front of monuments, Confederate monuments. And it is a great way, again, to get people to be able to talk about difficult history in ways that are healing. And so Abolitionist Museum has been the play that a lot of people associate with me in Juneteenth. But I call that Abolitionist Museum one of the history plays. And so I've got a series of them, about 6 of them, that are basically based in history and designed to help people have a conversation about, again, the issue of slavery. Growing up, you didn't mention Nat Turner, or if you did, it was in like hushed tones. It was like, it was dangerous to talk about Nat Turner. People were afraid of that topic, and or it made them really angry. So, having grown up with that, I kind of didn't know, exactly, what the reaction would be when I started to kind of do some research and so forth about Nat Turner, which took me out to Southampton County, where he lived and where the insurrection took place. And I met with the members of the Southampton County Historical Society, as well as I met with folks who were not members of the Southampton County Historical Society, and realized there were 2 camps out there, basically black and white. And it was eye-opening in terms of meeting descendants of Nat Turner and descendants of the victims of the Nat Turner insurrection. Basically, again, the white folks and the black folks. And their telling of that history, coming from those radically different perspectives, was a source of great tension, and needed to, you needed to tread lightly in terms of like dealing with everyone. So it has been since, for the last 20 years, again, finding my way through, the various personalities and events, and just sticking to doing the research, and which is basically trying to find the truth of the situation and being able to present that information to the larger public. So 12 Days of Turner, the name comes about because Nat Turner was captured on October 30th, given a trial, and then hung on November 11th. So we call that the 12 Days of Turner because of that time frame. And the goal of the 12 Days of Turner is to talk about the insurrection and to connect the kind of the ripple effects of the insurrection with what's going on in the world today. Because my belief, Juneteenth VA's belief, as articulated by me, is that the 1831 Nat Turner insurrection was the first battle in the war against slavery. WAS, War Against Slavery. And that battle kicked off a over 40-year war that ended in 1877. The Civil War happened in that time frame from 1861 to 1865. But the war against slavery is what we really need to be looking at in terms of the battle to end slavery in America. It starts with the 1831 Nat Turner insurrection, and the next battle would be the 1857 Dred Scott decision by the Supreme Court, which basically said that black folks would always be slaves, that we were born enslaved, and that we would be slaves for all of our natural lives. Dred Scott, by the way, also was from Southampton County. Very few people know that. And I think that's significant that Nat Turner and Dred Scott are from the same location. The third battle would be the 1859 John Brown raid on Harper's Ferry. That was 1859, and that was the final spark that led to the Civil War, or the war between the states, from 1861 to 65. But the war against slavery, again, starts in 1831 with the Nat Turner insurrection, and it ends in 1877 with the end of Reconstruction, which was marked by the withdrawal of the federal troops from the camps in the South, which allowed the rise of Jim Crow, the KKK, to be able to grow without any interference from the federal government.